All right, it's now time for Attorney Joe Fieschko of Fieschko Law Offices with an office in Uniontown on East Main Street, specializing in personal injury, workers' compensation, Social Security disability, and bankruptcy. Call 724-439-8300 or 800-242-2412. And we say good morning to Attorney Joe Fieschko. Joe, how are you today?
Great to be here in person. I think wasn't that the song in Groundhog Day?
It was,
Yeah, every
yes.
time he woke up, they played.
It played, yes.
Yeah, I thought that was really a classic movie.
It
What
was.
a great concept,
It
too.
was.
I mean, brilliant. Anyway, today we're going to talk about SSI and Social Security disability, but I do want to take a moment to talk about Pope Francis because his passing is important. The day after Easter, it's funny how these things happen like that. I know that he was a traditionalist. He didn't change a lot, didn't, make women priests. And I think in terms of the gay stuff, I think he said it's okay to be gay, but don't act on it. I don't know how that worked out, but I understand it. It's, the Catholic faith or the Catholic religion is conservative. And that's the way it is. But, what I liked about him so much was that he put an emphasis on caring for the poor and the downtrodden. And if Christ ever had any message, that's what it was. The rich people, well, God bless them. We like them, but they're doing okay. They don't need help. But, the great thing about Pope Francis was his humility and his emphasis on helping people that most people kind of don't like. And that's kind of what the important part was. On a local level, Bishop Zubik, who probably many of you know is the bishop for Pittsburgh, the first thing he did when he became the bishop, the guy before him lived in this enormous mansion, and I used to walk past it. Just to give you some idea, his next door neighbor was Elsie Hillman, and the Hillman's mansion was smaller than the bishop's. And it was on this really, it's a street that's above Carnegie Mellon University. And there's not many people that live on that street, and all of them are extremely rich. And they actually had the city put up a sign that said no outlet. And there was an outlet. It's not a dead-end street. So anyway, first thing Bishop Zubik does is he sells the mansion, and, the church is in need of money, and they help people. Catholic Charities is great. And he moves into a seminary. So now he's in a, small room with a, single bed and a crucifix on the wall. And if you're going to be the bishop or the Pope, because, Pope Francis dressed plainly too, that's really what it's about. So anyway, that's the way we'll remember Pope Francis. So let's now talk about Social Security disability and SSI. So one of the interesting things about, and you've heard this before from me, if you're under the age of 50, it's really, really hard to get Social Security disability or SSI. And the reason is no matter what your education is, what your work background is, you have to prove you can't do full-time sedentary work. And sedentary work is, sitting on your rear end. And of course, most of the time when I have these hearings, I myself or the judge asks the person, what do they do all day? And you know what the answer is. I sit on my rear end. Well, if you're under 50, that means you can work. Now, you can still win it. The way you do that under 50 is if somebody has something where they can't be at their workstation for more than 10% of the time. Somebody who has something like colitis or irritable bowel syndrome, where you're on the toilet, half of the day. That person can win if they're under 50 because they're not employable at a sedentary job. They won't be there. Or if you have the kind of illness, and really you need a real diagnosis. You can't come in with depression or fibromyalgia or something like that. But if you have a known disease and it's going to cause you to miss more than 1 day per month on a regular basis, then you can do it. But in contrast to that, if you're over the age of 55, if you've done heavy work, then it's an easy standard. You just have to prove you can't do what they call medium work. And medium work is standing all day and lifting 25 pounds and up to 50 pounds all day. 25 pounds all day and 50, is the heaviest. And honestly, most healthy people over the age of 55 have trouble doing medium work. So that makes it much easier. But they do look at your work background. So, for example, I'm an attorney, and if I went for Social Security disability, I would have to prove I can't be an attorney. Now, being an attorney is really, really simple physically. So I would have a hard burden. I just had a client who was over the age of 55, and she was the branch manager at a bank. And she was there, I think, about 25 years. And she has multiple sclerosis, which is a real disease. And she goes to a neurologist and she has all the symptoms. And we tried a few years ago and we lost. The judge said, hey, I think that you can do sedentary work even though you have MS. And then we were giving it one last try. And I'll get into how you can do that in a minute. But this time we got a judge from down in Jacksonville, Florida, and he, at the beginning of the hearing, he didn't even want a testimony. He looked at me and said, well, he didn't. Yeah, he did look at me because it was on video. He said, if you have MS, you can't work. It's like, well, good. So you do get that variation from judge to judge. And the odd thing was I had 2 hearings in front of this fella, and I didn't think I was going to win the lady with multiple sclerosis because she lost the last time. She had an easy job. But the other one, I thought I would win. This was a lady that is over 55, and she broke her back. And she was a bartender. And this is the interesting thing, and this is something that's sort of an interesting thing about Social Security. Social Security is part of the federal system, okay? We don't go over to, the Fayette County Courthouse for these cases. The administrative law judges begin it, and then eventually if you would appeal it, you go to the Appeals Council, then Federal District Court in Pittsburgh, then the Third Circuit, and then to the Supreme Court, theoretically. So the different circuits have different standards and different rulings. And this guy from Jacksonville, Florida, was down in the 11th Circuit, which is a pretty conservative circuit. Third Circuit's more middle of the road to liberal. And here we have this theory of what's called a combination job. And combination jobs are big in Fayette County. And let me give you a little perspective. A couple of years ago, I represented the postmaster of Champion, Pennsylvania. And as you know, Champion, Pennsylvania is up by Seven Springs. It's in the snow belt. And when you're the postmaster in a little post office like that, you're a one-man band. So not only did she get the letters, put them in the post boxes, sell stamps, all that jazz, but she had to go out and shovel the walk and salt it and all that stuff. And we had lost in front of the administrative law judge because he looked up postmaster, and postmaster said, you got to sort letters. And I said, no, that's not what this lady did. And the appeals council agreed, and they said, no, she was doing what they call a combination job. So if you are, working in a big post office and all you do is sort the letters, then that's one thing. But if you're doing these other things, then Social Security has to show that you can do those other things, which she couldn't. She had a ruptured disc in her back. But anyway, back to my lady with a broken back. We lost in front of this judge. So it was funny. I won the one I thought I'd lose, and I lost the one I thought I'd win. But his biggest problem was, and I was trying to teach him about this combination job idea, but he hadn't heard of it down at the 11th Circuit, and so we lost. So I took it to the appeals council, and I know I'm going to win. And this is the reason. When you're over 55 and they're looking to the job you performed, this lady was a bartender, and there's this thing called the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, and it says what a bartender does. And it said, you cut up limes and put them in those little things, and you mix drinks, and then you pour beer, and that's about it. Well, there's another job called a bartender's helper. And out here, that's what bartenders do. So she did that part, which is easy. But then also she'd roll the kegs in to put together. She'd go get the cases of beer. She was even mopping the floors. So when you have a combination job, Social Security has to show that you can do the harder job. So I didn't, I don't know if she could do the bartender's job because she said she can't stand for a long time. But there's no question she couldn't do this bartender's helper job. So sometimes you'll win a Social Security case on kind of an interesting issue like that. And Social Security does make mistakes. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the mistakes. And honestly, maybe this sounds familiar to somebody out there. One of the aspects, and I do have a lot of clients that get workers' compensation and Social Security disability, because you have a real bad work injury and you come in, first thing I'm going to have you do is apply for Social Security disability, because you probably will get that too. When someone's getting both of those benefits, there's a thing called the 80% rule. And essentially what the 80% rule is, you have to take the best 5 years you ever worked. So let's say that, they ring you up, your Social Security number up on their computer, and they find your top 5 years, and let's say that you made $36,000 per year on average in your top 5 years. Well, that means you're making $3,000 a month in your top 5 years, and 80% of that $3,000 is $2,400. So what the 80% rule says is you take what you're getting on workers' compensation per month, and let's say you're getting $2,000 per month on workers' comp. Then you can only get up to 80% of those top 5 years. In other words, the $2,400 is a ceiling, and you bump your head up against the ceiling. So if you get Social Security disability, maybe you're supposed to get $1,800 a month in Social Security. You're not going to get that $1,800 a month. You're going to get $400 a month because of that 80% rule. Now, in many cases, you settle your workers' comp case. They give you $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever they get you. And how's the 80% rule fit into that? Well, what happens is there's another rule that says you take the amount you get in your pocket. The attorney gets 20%. So let's say you get $100,000. The attorney gets $20,000. You get $80,000. And what they do then is they calculate your life expectancy. So let's say you're a 55-year-old man, and I think you're expected to live to be 81 in this day and age. Well, they divide the 80,000 by all of those months, and they get a very small rate. They'll say, okay, 80,000 divided by 85. I think that comes out to about $9 a month. So that's what they use in calculating the 80% rule. Well, now instead of getting the $2,000 a month, now you're getting $90 a month according to this calculation. So boom, you get your full Social Security disability of $1,800 in that example that I was using. So when you settle a case and you're on disability, a lot of what you lose in workers' comp on a monthly basis instead of the lump sum, I mean, you got a big hunk of money in the bank, you get back with your Social Security disability. So that's standard. And I did that for a guy about 5 years ago. And what happened with him, and here's another thing you should know about Social Security disability. If you have minor children, they also get a check, not for SSI, but for Social Security disability, they also get a check. And it's a kind of a complicated formula depending on how many kids you have and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so we settle, and he was not, he was affected by this 80% rule thing. So he had won his disability, but he was getting no disability because of the 80% rule. The workers' comp amount exceeded the 80%. So he's supposed to start getting checks because we submitted the settlement papers showing that we used the Scarata language, they call it, and they were supposed to spread it out over the balance of his life. That was 5 years ago. Well, they never restored his benefits. So, we had to file a petition with Social Security. And I explained to him, but, somebody honestly that didn't know the law at Social Security, they wouldn't budge. So we kept appealing, and they said finally, okay, well, we'll schedule it for a hearing, and they're going to schedule it for a hearing this summer. And lo and behold, on Friday, the judge took one look at it and said, oh, well, they screwed this one up. So he awarded benefits, and he's going to get 5 years of benefits. Plus, he's back on Social Security disability. So once in a while, they will make mistakes like that, and you can't let it drop. You just have to. I mean, sometimes you won't get the benefits because you don't deserve them, or there's something reason you don't get them. But many times there are errors that somebody in Social Security makes, and I don't know why, but sometimes they do, and you have to keep going with it. I'll give you another example. I have another fella that was in a bad car accident, and he's young. He's 38 years old, but he had to go through 3 separate surgeries, and he was off for a year and a half from his job. And after a year and a half, he was cured, and he went back. He's a plumber. So and he's back plumbing, and that's not an easy job. Now, for Social Security disability, you don't have to be permanently disabled. You have to be disabled for 12 months or more, okay? And his case was going nowhere. We filed it, and there was just nothing happening in the normal course. So I finally got a hold of them, and they had some memo where a guy wrote, oh, well, this guy's back to work, so we're not even going to process the claim. So I wrote to him, I said, you have to process the claim. He was off a year and a half. Now he's back full time, but we don't have to prove he's permanently disabled, only a year. So again, it went to somebody's desk that knows what they're doing, and there you go. So now his case is being processed. He still has a difficult burden, but I can tell you that when I've had these situations where I have a younger person who's back to work, that really works in your favor. There's a lot of credibility. You don't have a guy going in who's 38, says, oh, I never recovered. It's like, come on. So, and the reason that works, first of all, credibility. If you go through the surgeries, you get better, go back to work, you're a credible person. So that the second thing is and I think this is in the back of some judges' minds. When you're 38, the judge thinks, well, geez, if I put this guy on disability, society's going to be paying for this guy for another 24 years. Whereas if he's back working, that's not a consideration. So society's not paying for him. He just, gets what he's entitled to because he's been paying into Social Security all of his life. So that's another one you run into once in a while. Here's another one that I commonly run into, and a lot of people will call Social Security and they'll say, no, don't even apply because you're not entitled to it. Okay. So here's another element of Social Security disability you need to know. And I'll contrast it with SSI for a moment. For SSI claims, you have to be poor and disabled. If you never worked a day in your life, you can get SSI. And of course, some people that are born with very serious conditions and their parents aren't making a lot of money can get childhood SSI. So you get it right from the beginning. Adult SSI, is for whatever reason a person never worked, well, you can still get SSI. And, it's not great. I think it's $940 per month. You're probably already on Medicaid, and you can't work at all. If you make $200 a month, you get $740 instead of $940. If somebody is housing you, then they'll take a $300 credit and say, hey, you're living somewhere for free and you should be paying, so we're going to give you $640 instead of $940. You can only own one car. You can't own your home. You can have $2,000 in the bank. But for example, let's say that your grandpa dies and leaves you an acre up in Salt Lake Township. You're off SSI. You got to sell that thing and account for the money. So anyway, that's SSI. It is for people that are disabled and poor. Social Security disability is the one for workers, and your rate is based on how much money you put into the system. You don't get it for the first 6 months after your date of disability. There's a 6-month delay. If you're poor also, because some people get poor right after they get disabled, you can get SSI for those first 6 months, but normally there's a 6-month delay. You can work on Social Security disability. Last year, you could make up to $1,470 per month, and it wouldn't affect your check. You can call up Social Security and say, hey, I'm making $1,300 a month. I'm working every day, or not every day, but probably 2 or 3 days a week. Social Security says, we don't care, as long as it's under $1,470. So, that's a lot of people that can't work full-time but can work part-time doing something really easy. You can supplement. You get Medicare. You get a Medicare card 2.5 years after your date of disability. So there's all kinds of good things about Social Security disability that are not included with SSI, again, because you earned it. So one of the other items is to qualify for Social Security disability, you have to take your date of disability. And sometimes that's easy to figure out. If you were in an accident, that was the day that you got injured or got disabled. But some people have diabetes or cancer or something like that. And exactly the date they became disabled from that's going to be up to the judge or Social Security. But whatever it is, you take that date and you look back 10 years. And you say, did this person work 20 of the 40 quarters preceding their date of disability? Okay, so there's 4 quarters in a year, and therefore you have to work 5 of the last 10 years. Now, most people, frankly, worked the whole 10 years and got sick or disabled, and there's no problem. Sometimes people work sporadically. I've actually had people that had like 19 quarters, And I said, look, just try and work one more quarter and then you're going to get it. But here's the one that Social Security gets confused about sometimes. Let's say that you're 62 years old and you retire. You just say to yourself, I've had enough. I'm still healthy, but I'm going to take that big cut in Social Security and retire at 62. And I think most people listening to this program know that when you take old age Social Security at 62, you lose a lot of money. Actually, you get 8% more per month for every year you put it off after 62 up to 70. Like I put it off till I was 70, and I'm getting a fortune because I always put the max in. So if you can, it's smart to put it off if you can. But anyway, back to the ranch. So what happens is, let's say you're 62, you're healthy, and maybe you've got enough savings, and you say, well, to heck with it, I'm just going to take my old age Social Security. So you take it, and you're healthy, and you're 62. Let's say that when you're 64, you get sick. Now, you're already on old age Social Security, even though you're getting a small amount, and now you're sick and you can't work. So even if you want to go back to work, you've had it. You got diabetes or cancer or whatever the heck you have. You can't go back. You can go get Social Security disability. Because remember, you worked the 20 of the last 40 quarters. If you are just off 8 quarters, that means you still got those 32 quarters. You're over 55, so it's pretty easy to get. And when you apply for Social Security disability, Social Security disability pays at what they call the full rate, and that's the rate you get if you retired at the age of 66 years and 10 months. So if you're one of these people, and I've had more than one, and honestly, usually when I'm talking about this on the radio, somebody calls me and says, hey, thanks a lot. So what happens is you apply when you're 64, but I've had people say, hey, my local office won't even take my application because they say there's no such thing. That's because the guy you're talking to doesn't know what he's doing. So you have to keep going, or I will help you apply online, and you will apply at the age of 64. And again, if you win it, which it's fairly easy to win, then they knock you up to the 66 years, 10-month rate, which is, let's see, 8, 16, 24, 32. I think that's about 40% more per month. So that's a huge difference. And if you're one of these people that did retire early and is taking it on the chin for that, if you become disabled, then you can get the much higher rate, and that's huge. That's the rest of your life. Okay, here's another one. Historically, I never help people apply for Social Security disability or SSI. You begin it with filling out an application. Well, what happened was when COVID comes along, all the Social Security offices are closed. And the only way to apply is online. And many people, especially older people, can't do that. They don't have the technical know-how, or somehow they just can't do it. So that's when I started helping people applying online. Matter of fact, somebody's coming in today at 12:30, and we're going to do that. The success rate is enormous. And I found out, well, especially if you're older, but I found that people would make mistakes when they applied all by themselves. And the one that I remember the most was, if you recall, if you live in Uniontown, Uniontown used to have their own sanitary or garbage department. They hired all the garbage men, and they would go around, and it'd be the city of Uniontown employees and all that kind of stuff. So they did away with that. Boy, what's that, 10, 15 years ago? So now they have a company, Waste Management or something like that. But in terms of the budget, they think they're better off, and probably they are. But anyway, so being a garbage man is about as hard a job as you can have. I know people look down on them and all that stuff, but come on, who the heck wants to be out when it's -2 degrees, slipping and sliding over icy streets, lifting up, God knows what's in them. I sometimes, when grass season's there, people fill their garbage cans with grass. They weigh a ton. Well, what happens then is these guys were all beat the heck. And they all came into my office to get Social Security disability. They were all over 55. And, so all we had to do is prove they couldn't be garbage men. So every single one of them won except one. And that was back in the day when I didn't help people apply. And what the guy had done was this. He was a garbage man. 90% of the time he went out and, I think they called them pickers. He just would pick. But he was a little brighter than the other guys. So when the boss was sick, he would be the boss. And being the boss was about as easy a job as I've ever heard. The judge asked him, well, what did you do as the boss when you're there that, I don't know, 10, 20% of the time? And he said, well, you just sit there and usually that's about it. But if somebody calls and said a raccoon got my garbage or the garbage truck was late or whatever, then you talk to him. So the judge used that job and said, you can work because anybody could do that job. So we again, put it through appeals, and that was on appeal for years. And I think that's when the combination job idea was just coming around. And eventually they determined that he was doing a combination job because he was a garbage man. So we eventually won it, but boy, that was, that one took a long time. So nowadays, when I help people apply, they don't make that mistake. We put what he was actually doing, and that's so you win them. Obvious cases like that where you used to have to lose and go through the appeal period. Now we don't have to do that because I help people right off the bat. So we're starting to get towards the top of the hour, and I get to be on till 11:59. So I do want to talk a little bit about myself. I am Joseph Fieschko. At this stage in the game, I'm mostly doing personal injury cases, but I do a lot of workers' compensation and a lot of Social Security disability. I have been referring my bankruptcies and wills and estates off to, other attorneys because I'm trying to slow down here. I still do the unpaid overtime cases, so I'm pretty unique for that. Very few people do that. Also do a lot of work-related hearing loss. That's kind of a specialty that, they kind of acknowledge me as, somebody that knows what they're doing there. We have, my wife Regina and I, that's our firm. We have offices in Pittsburgh, which is where I live, and also in Uniontown and in Somerset. And if you have a question in any of those areas, give me a call. I talk to you for free. And if you want to come in, the first appointment's always free. And I do everything now on contingent fee. So, if we don't win or you don't have a case, there's no charge. If we win it, of course, then, it's 20% for workers' comp, 25% of the first check for Social Security disability, and I charge 33 1/3% for the personal injury cases. So now PJ's back here. I got 30 seconds to go. So we're talking about Social Security disability cases today and the way you can get those and the processes that you go through. It's been a pleasure working in Uniontown since 1978. So we're heading right into the national anthem in just a minute. Okay.
Take
God
care,
bless you.
Joe.
Take care.
And we'll
Talk to you next month.
Yep, beginning of May. And that was attorney Joe Fieschko on this Monday here on WMBS.
You're listening to WMBS Uniontown. Now, ladies and gentlemen,